Hi, today we're looking at moments where real life acts stranger than fiction. Cases so deeply bizarre, they sound like urban legends, except every single one is terrifyingly true. From a mishap involving a metal straw, a tennis ball, and a dog, to a popcorn machine that claims a victim in the most shocking way imaginable. It was August 12th, 2019 in Portland, Oregon. Inside Eloise Caldwell's small apartment, where the kitchen had a polished hardwood floor, a tall, lightweight stool beside the island, a stainless steel insulated drink cup, and a young Labrador chasing a tennis ball. Eloise was 28 years old. She worked as a graphic designer, and friends later described her as warm, organized, and proud of the home she had recently finished fixing up. To celebrate, she invited a few close friends over for dinner. Eloise also preferred environmentally friendly products. She carried a stainless steel reusable straw with no flexible section. Her friends had seen it so often that nobody thought anything about it. After dinner, everyone stayed in the kitchen talking while dessert dishes remained on the island. One guest had brought a young Labrador, which happily chased a tennis ball across the room. The dog was not aggressive or out of control. It simply ran after the ball, slid slightly on the polished floor, turned, and came back. It passed close to the stools several times without incident. If I had been standing in that kitchen, I doubt I would have noticed any danger. A playful dog running around friends feels completely normal. Eloise sat on a tall stool beside the island, holding her insulated cup with the rigid metal straw still inside. She was talking with friends and taking occasional sips. Then, the tennis ball rolled back toward the island. The Labrador darted after it and squeezed beneath Eloise's stool. As it brushed through, one leg of the lightweight stool slid several inches across the smooth floor. Eloise was already turned slightly toward another guest, and that small shift pushed her center of gravity beyond the stool's base. Witnesses described it as a quick slip rather than a violent crash. From the height of the stool, however, it was enough to throw her off balance. Before Eloise could even think about dropping the cup, her hand instinctively tightened around it as she tried to steady herself. In a split second like that, most people would instinctively hold on to whatever they're carrying instead of thinking about where to put it down. The stool tipped farther. As Eloise fell, the cup stayed close to her upper body. The rigid stainless steel straw did not bend as the impact forced the cup against her, causing a catastrophic injury. Her friends immediately realized the fall was far more serious than it first appeared. One called emergency services, while the others stayed beside Eloise and followed the dispatcher's instructions. Paramedics found Eloise still alive but critically injured. She was treated at the apartment before being taken to a nearby trauma center, where she died later that evening. Investigators documented the scene, examined the stool and cup, and interviewed everyone present. They found no evidence of foul play. The Labrador had not attacked Eloise. It had simply chased a tennis ball beneath the stool at the worst possible moment. I also can't help thinking about the friend who brought the dog. They simply brought a happy pet to dinner, never imagining that ordinary decision would become part of such a heartbreaking accident. The medical examiner ruled Eloise's death accidental, concluding that the fatal injury occurred during a household fall in which the rigid metal straw contributed to the trauma. Following the case, people were reminded to use extra caution with rigid, reusable straws as they do not bend during a fall. Eloise's death resulted from an extraordinary chain of ordinary events. A polished floor, a lightweight stool, a playful dog, a drink held by reflex, and a rigid straw at exactly the wrong moment. That is what makes her story one of the strangest accidental deaths ever recorded. Now this next story starts with something even smaller, a simple wooden toothpick. It was March 9th, 2021, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Inside a closed neighborhood steakhouse with wet mop marks on the floor, trash bags by the back door, and paperwork waiting to be finished. The manager was Zora Shires. She was 33 years old, and she had worked there long enough that most of the staff trusted her with everything. She was steady, busy, and a little stubborn in the way hard workers can be. If something needed to be counted, cleaned, or checked, Zora usually handled it herself. That night, she stayed after closing because the restaurant had just finished a strong month. The owner wanted food counts checked, order sheets updated, and the storage room ready for the next delivery. Zora wanted the paperwork finished before she went home so the morning crew would not walk into a mess. One thing her co-workers noticed was the toothpicks. Zora chewed them while walking through the kitchen, checking the freezer, and sitting in the tiny office near the back. It was a habit. Plenty of people chew gum, bite pens, or keep something in their mouth while thinking. She often went through several toothpicks during a single shift, replacing one with another almost without thinking. I understand habits like that. Sometimes the small thing that helps you focus becomes so normal that you stop seeing it as a risk. After the last customers left, a few workers stayed to clean. Someone boxed up leftover pizza for the staff. The grill was off, chairs were up on tables, and the dining room was quiet except for buckets and dishes being moved. Zora sat near the office desk with papers spread out in front of her. She had the toothpick between her lips while checking food lists. A coworker passed behind her with a trash bag and called for her attention from only a few feet away. Zora turned quickly in her chair and swallowed at the wrong moment. The toothpick slipped down before she could stop it. She coughed hard and stood up. The workers nearby came over. She bent forward, coughed again, and drank water. After a short while, the worst of it seemed to pass. She could breathe. She could talk. She looked shaken, but not like someone who needed to be rushed out. One coworker wanted her to get checked that night. Zora refused. She believed the toothpick had gone down into her stomach and would pass on its own. She was embarrassed, tired, and still thinking about the reports. That choice mattered. Instead of treating it like a sharp object inside her body, she treated it like an uncomfortable mistake. This is where I feel frustrated. Not at Zora, but at how easy it is to talk yourself out of help. If the pain is not huge right away, many of us wait. She finished enough paperwork to feel better, then locked up and went home. During the night, the discomfort grew into deep pain in her throat and upper chest. She drank water, tried to rest, and hoped it would settle. By the next day, she was coughing more. Then she noticed small streaks of blood in her spit. That scared her enough to seek help. That blood would have scared me too. I understand hoping it would pass, but seeing blood makes the mistake feel real. At the emergency room, she explained that she had swallowed a wooden toothpick. Wood does not always show clearly on common body pictures. Doctors saw signs that something sharp had caused damage, but finding the object was not simple. Her pain became worse while she was being checked. Doctors later found that the toothpick had pierced part of her food pipe, letting infection spread inside her chest. By the time surgeons found the injury, they had to work quickly to repair and clean the area. Zora survived the surgery at first, but her body had already been fighting the hidden injury too long. Even after surgery, the infection kept spreading. Her body became too weak to recover. She died after the complications became too severe. The medical examiner reviewed the hospital findings, surgery notes, and statements from the staff. The cause of death was ruled accidental. Zora had swallowed a wooden toothpick that pierced her food pipe, and the delay in getting medical care allowed a hidden infection to spread. During surgery and the later examination, doctors also found several older toothpick fragments farther down in her digestive tract, suggesting she had unknowingly swallowed them before. None had caused serious damage, but the discovery made the case even more unusual. The restaurant later told workers not to chew toothpicks while on duty and reminded staff to get medical help right away if they swallowed something sharp. Some dangers stay hidden until it's too late. The next story starts with friends laughing together before everything suddenly changed. It was July 24th, 2018, in Asheville, North Carolina, at a city park where a landscape architecture firm had set up tables, coolers, lawn games, and a small demonstration garden for their annual summer picnic. Amelia Orlandi was 31 years old and worked as a landscape architect for the firm. She was the kind of person who showed up early, helped carry things, and stayed until the cleanup was done. Her coworkers liked her because she brought energy to both the job and the people around her. The picnic celebrated the completion of a large public project. Volunteers grilled food near the shelter, set up games on the grass, and helped children plant flowers in the demonstration garden that Amelia had helped design. Coolers sat around the picnic shelter filled with canned soft drinks, bottled water, and sports drinks. It was warm, the kind of summer afternoon where people reach for something cold without thinking too much about it. Amelia had opened a can of lemon lime soda during lunch. She took a few sips, then set it down when someone needed help unloading folding tables from a trailer. Based on when she walked away and when she returned, Witnesses estimated the can had been sitting open for close to half an hour. Warm weather and anything sweet will attract yellow jackets, and that afternoon, the shelter had plenty of both. Earlier that day, another employee had picked up an unattended soda, spotted a yellow jacket crawling inside, and poured it onto the grass. That person joked that everyone should check their cans before drinking. People laughed and looked at their drinks briefly, but the afternoon kept moving, and most had already stopped thinking about it by the time Amelia came back to the table. That coworker actually did the right thing. They spotted the danger and said something. The room just moved on too fast for it to matter. When the unloading was done, Amelia came back to the table, recognized her can, and took a long drink. She had no reason to look inside it. Based on what witnesses saw and what investigators later pieced together, a yellow jacket had crawled into the open can while it sat unattended. When Amelia drank, it was carried into her mouth and stung the side of her tongue. She pulled the can away and spat out the drink. The yellow jacket was found on the table near where the liquid landed. People nearby turned. She told them something had stung her inside her mouth. That is the thing about warnings that come wrapped in a joke. They land, get a laugh, and then disappear. Within a short time, the swelling started. Amelia's speech became harder to understand. Her breathing changed. What had started as visible pain around her mouth was becoming something much larger inside her body. Nobody at the picnic carried an emergency allergy kit because nobody knew Amelia had a severe allergy. She had never been stung before. There was nothing in her history to suggest she needed one. A first sting can be the most dangerous one. There is no way to know how your body will respond until it already has. Someone called for emergency help while others kept her calm. Paramedics arrived and gave her medicine right away before continuing treatment on the way to the hospital. Doctors worked to stop the reaction, but her body had already moved too far into it. Amelia died later that day. The medical examiner confirmed that Amelia had not died because the wasp blocked her airway. She died because her body responded to the sting with a severe allergic reaction her system could not survive. The sting inside her mouth made the swelling develop faster than it might have on the skin. The yellow jacket recovered at the scene, the open can, the witness accounts, and the timeline all pointed to the same conclusion. Her employer updated outdoor event safety procedures after that, adding covered drink containers, reminders about unattended cans, and allergy awareness to future event planning. This next story follows a careful driver who never knew the danger was already inside her car. It was October 3rd, 2018, in Houston, Texas, on a quiet stretch of road between Mayrin Minwell's home and her first work appointment of the morning. With light traffic, a paper coffee cup in the cup holder, and a used sedan that had one problem nobody knew about yet. Mayrin was 34 years old. She worked as an insurance claims adjuster, which meant she spent most of her week driving to damaged properties, writing down what she saw, and filing detailed reports. She was organized, early to everything, and the kind of person who planned her route the night before. Work was important to her, and she took it seriously. A few months before that morning, Mayrin had bought the sedan from a family friend. She needed a reliable car for the road, the price was fair, and she trusted the person selling it. That kind of trust is easy to understand. What neither of them knew was that the car had an unresolved safety recall tied to a part inside the airbag. Notices about the recall had been mailed out, but they went to the address of the previous owner. So the car changed hands, and the problem came with it quietly. There is something deeply unsettling about that detail. Mayrin did everything right. The danger was already there before either of them got involved. Mayrin left home early that morning because a round of storms had moved through the area the previous week, and her schedule was full of vehicles and properties that needed to be checked. She stopped briefly for coffee, then got back on the road. Traffic was light. She was wearing her seatbelt and driving within the speed limit, the same way she always did. Then the vehicle ahead slowed suddenly for a pedestrian crossing. Mayrin pressed the brakes. She slowed, but not fast enough. The front of her sedan made contact with the rear of the vehicle ahead. It was not a severe crash. The damage to both vehicles was minor. Under normal conditions, Mayrin would have walked away from something like that with a sore neck at worst. But the airbag deployed. When the airbag went off, the part inside it that was supposed to control the release failed. Rather than inflating the bag safely, it broke apart and sent sharp pieces outward at high speed into the area where Mayrin was sitting. The crash had not hurt her. The airbag had. I find this almost impossible to process. The device designed to keep her alive is the reason she did not survive. That kind of cruel irony does not feel real until you look at the evidence and realize it happened exactly that way. People nearby called for help right away. Emergency workers arrived and found Mayrin inside the car. They transported her to a nearby trauma center where doctors performed emergency surgery, but the injuries from the airbag were severe. Mayrin died from those injuries. The crash itself was survivable. What was not survivable was the failure of the part inside the airbag. Afterward, investigators examined the car carefully. They looked at the airbag system, the broken part, and the records attached to that vehicle. The part matched, one included in a manufacturer recall. The recall had never been completed because the notices never reached the right person. Federal investigators verified the findings. The cause of death was ruled accidental, connected directly to the airbag failure rather than the collision. That quiet gap between a notice sent and a repair never made is the detail that stays with me. One letter going to the wrong address set everything else in motion. The case added to a larger conversation about checking open recalls before buying a used vehicle. Recall databases are available to the public, and a quick check can reveal whether a safety repair was ever completed. Mayrin never saw the real threat coming. In our next case, the danger wasn't the animal everyone feared. It was May 6th, 2016, in Phoenix, Arizona, inside a back room of an exotic pet store with travel containers stacked along the walls, extension cords crossing the floor, heating equipment running along the shelving, and a large tarantula that had not yet been packed for the morning. Rosin Mies was 29 years old. She worked at the store full-time and had spent years handling reptiles, arachnids, and other animals that most people would not go near. She was careful, experienced, and genuinely passionate about the work. Her coworkers trusted her with the animals that needed the most attention. That evening, she was alone in the back room preparing for an educational expo the following morning. The room was more crowded than usual because supply bags, food containers, and extra equipment had already been pulled out and placed around the floor. One of the last animals that needed to be moved was a large, old-world tarantula. The travel container she planned to use had a latch that kept jamming. She repositioned it several times trying to get it to close properly. While she worked on it, a glass terrarium she had cleaned earlier was leaning against one of the cabinets nearby. Extension cords for the heating equipment ran across part of the floor between her and the shelving unit on the far wall. I picture her focused on the stubborn latch, not thinking about anything else in the room. That kind of tunnel vision is normal when a task takes longer than expected. When she finally started the transfer, the tarantula got loose and moved toward the shelving unit where the heating equipment was running. Electrical heat sources are dangerous for certain animals, and Rosin knew it. Her first instinct was to get between the spider and the equipment before it disappeared into the wiring. She moved quickly across the room. Her foot caught one of the extension cords on the floor. She lost her footing and hit the glass terrarium leaning against the cabinet. The glass shattered on impact. Everything changed in that moment. She wasn't afraid of the spider. She was trying to protect it, and that instinct led to her fall. Rosin fell with the broken glass. The injuries were serious. Employees working in the front of the store heard the crash. After she did not answer when they called out and checked the back room, they found her and immediately called emergency services. Responders found Rosin inside and transported her to a trauma center. Surgeons worked to treat the injuries, but they were too severe. Rosin died after the surgery. The tarantula was found later in the room, unharmed. Afterward, investigators examined the back room. They looked at the broken terrarium, the extension cords, the travel container with the jammed latch, and the placement of everything in the space. The tarantula had not bitten Rosin and had not caused the fall directly. What caused the fall was the extension cord on a cluttered floor. The spider escaping had simply been the reason she moved quickly across it. The death was ruled accidental. The official finding pointed to the fall and the injuries from the broken glass as the cause of death. Exotic animal organizations responded by reminding handlers to clear work areas before any animal transfer. no matter how familiar the process feels. Extension cords, loose equipment, and leaning objects near a transfer area become serious hazards the moment something unexpected happens. Now, this next story shows how an ordinary machine became far deadlier than anyone expected. It was January 22nd, 2022, in Des Moines, Iowa, inside a movie theater concession area with a commercial popcorn machine that had been making the wrong sounds, a health inspection coming up before the weekend, and Mar Kilborn already at work before most of the staff had arrived. Mar was 38 years old and had maintained concession equipment at that theater for more than a decade. He knew the machines well enough to hear when something was off. He was dependable, thorough, and the person management called when something needed to be handled correctly. The inspection was scheduled before the biggest release weekend of the month, which meant the concession area needed to be fully operational. One of the large popcorn machines had been giving trouble. The heating inside it was behaving inconsistently, and Mar had already logged an unusual hissing and scraping sound during an earlier test. He shut it down that morning, found a worn fitting inside the heating assembly, and replaced it. With the fitting changed, he needed to run the machine again to confirm it was working. The replacement parts originally ordered for a fuller repair had not arrived yet, but the worn fitting had been swapped, and Mar had reason to believe the machine was stable enough to test. This is the part where I feel the weight of what his job required. He was not being reckless. He was doing what maintenance workers do. Fix what you can, check your work, and keep things moving. The pressure of that inspection was real. The machine started up. Coworkers nearby continued setting up the concession stand while Mar monitored the kettle. At first, nothing unusual happened. The kettle heated, the oil warmed, and the machine ran the way it was supposed to. But the heating controls had a fault the fitting replacement had not resolved. The temperature kept rising past the point where it was supposed to stop, and the built-in system that should have cut the power did not respond. Within moments, the overheated oil began producing excessive steam, and the kettle suddenly boiled over. A burst of scalding oil and steam erupted from the open kettle, with some of the overheated oil briefly igniting in a flash fire as it escaped. Mar, who was standing closest to the machine, was caught in the blast. Employees nearby cut the power, followed emergency steps, and called for help right away. I cannot imagine what those first few seconds were like for the people standing there. One moment they were setting up for a regular workday, and the next, everything changed. Emergency workers transported Mar to a burn and trauma center. Doctors performed surgery and treated the burns over several days of intensive care. Despite the treatment, Mar's body could not recover from the damage. He died from complications related to the accident. Afterward, investigators examined the machine, the heating controls, the fitting Mar had replaced, and the maintenance records he had kept. They determined that a separate failure in the heating control system had allowed the kettle to continue overheating far beyond its intended operating temperature. The fitting replacement had addressed one problem, but it had not corrected the hidden control fault that caused the dangerous boil-over and flash fire. The theater removed similar machines from use until full inspections were completed. Maintenance guidelines were updated to require that faulty equipment be fully repaired before being returned to operation, not partially repaired while waiting for additional parts. The death was ruled a workplace accident caused by equipment failure from overheating and a malfunction in the heating control system. The hardest part to accept is that Mar did everything right. He just couldn't see the hidden fault that mattered most.